You're listening to the Acts Companion Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sean. Along with me is Pastor Ryan. Join us as we dive deep into the book of Acts, learning and discussing the movement Jesus launched called the Church, and how it has and continues to turn the world upside down. Ryan, you know what's interesting is as I was sitting in church yesterday, I was struck by the fact that your last three sermons have all been under the guise of practical. I think you've let out by saying that they're practical, but I don't know if it's just my level of thinking, but I found them so immensely helpful. And as I was talking to some people in our small group about it, it's funny that from an information standpoint, it's almost like we rate philosophical, pastoral, practical, how we talk about we want to go deeper on those three things on the podcast, and we put practical down low. But I think Jesus was actually super practical. So anyways, thank you for the last three teachings. I think practical is my speed. I hope it was a blessing to others.
Last four, really.
Really the last four, right?
Because it was how to hear God's voice.
Yep.
That was pretty practical.
Very.
Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
And then good news for all. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was the least practical of the three.
Sure.
That was the most theological. And then the last two, how to get along in God's family. And then the most recently, I'm awake this morning. What was my most recent sermon?
From yesterday?
Yeah.
Key people and key
That's
places.
right. Key people and key places. That's right. Yes. Just talking about the power of place and the power of relationships. So I really think you're right. It's practical, but the theme, I would say, of the last month, in my opinion, if you take out the How to Hear God's Voice sermon, which we covered in the last podcast, but really from the last podcast recording to this one, it's been all about relationships. That's probably why your community group thinks it's practical, because it's very, very, very relational. It's like, who is the gospel news for?
Yep.
Everybody. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, how do I share that with everybody? Mm-hmm. How do I do that? Well, and so if you remember, I kind of went back into look at what Peter did. How did Peter package the gospel announcement to Gentiles? What did he say? He's the true king. He's the true prophet. He's the true priest. So translated, he's the one fit to rule all and judge all. And so if that's the gospel announcement we're going to give to everybody in the world, we have to contextualize that and go, well, who do they think is ruling all instead of Jesus? Right. Who do people think is in charge?
Right.
Me, I'm in charge. Mm-hmm. Culture's in charge. The mob's in charge.
Right.
Governments are in charge. Okay, Jesus is actually in charge, right? Mm-hmm. So that's that intersection. And then truth. What is truth? What really? Where is meaning found and experienced? Is meaning made, or is meaning found by receiving it and experiencing it? That's the prophet. Jesus is the true prophet, the fulfillment of all the truth speakers that have ever spoken.
Yeah.
And so what sort of system or philosophy or worldview do you live in and live out of that's actually your truth, quote unquote? And is your truth the truth? Because there's not many truth. There's the truth. Mm-hmm. And there's everybody in a postmodern world trying to live their truth. And then the last thing, he's the priest. So how do we overcome guilt, shame, that deep thing inside of us that knows that even if we could write all the rules, we'd be displeased with our inability to live up to our own standards.
Right.
So how do we get rid of the icky in us? I think those three things, I know I'm going back 3 sermons, but I did like that sermon. It was the most theological, but it is relational, because it's about how do I share, if the gospel is for all, if Jesus is Lord of all, the good news is for all. So how do I do it? Well, you have to find out where someone is, where they've put a sense of authority, kingship,
right,
where they've put their sense of meaning, profit, and what they do with their guilt, their shame, their dissatisfaction.
Right.
Where do they place their longings and their hopes and their desires and where do they place that? That's the priest.
Yeah.
And so to me, faithful gospel witness is learning how to exegete culture or friendships or the city we live in and say, what's our city thinking is, where do they derive their sense of authority? Who's in charge?
Right.
And why do they think that?
Yeah. You shared this, I think, I was in first service, so maybe you shared this in all 3 of your sermons, but if the gospel's for all, headline, subtitle, If it's for all, how to get along with all,
Yeah,
or something.
that was the next week.
Yeah, that was the next.
Yeah, the
week. It's
next week
kinda
was
like this-
okay. So the previous sermon is obviously Peter and Cornelius and the gospel breaking out to the Gentiles, and Peter and the Jews catching up. The Jerusalem church kind of going, whoa. Chapter 11 is him reporting back to the Jerusalem church what happened, and they were not pleased. They were hearing rumors that he was in a Gentile's home, which breaks kosher law. It breaks their cleanliness laws. So he has to explain himself. So he just retells the story. But I think the subtext of that is definitely, okay, if God is moving amongst us, and when God moves amongst us, he changes things and moves us into places we wouldn't often go, and often we are around people we wouldn't choose to be around. How do we get along with each other? Because we're going to have all sorts of rumors, gossip, temptations. We're going to experience all sorts of uncomfortable confrontations where people say things to us like, hey man, like, why'd you do that? Or we have to say to someone else, hey, I don't think that was right or appropriate or godly or kind or compassionate or what have you. So we've now got interpersonal tension in the family of God. If the gospel makes a big family of all nations, then how do the nations get along?
Right.
I mean, that's the question, which really touches on so much stuff, right? Like, think about this component also touches on even very uncomfortable subjects that we did not prepare at all to talk about, but it's on my mind, so I'm going to make you uncomfortable.
Let's go.
Immigration.
Yeah.
Like, if you think about if Jesus is Lord of all and the gospel is for all, that means that there are people who are in the family of God. Like right now, this is a huge tension in our country because we have a new president, we have a new administration, and this is a hot button political conversation. Like, man, are there people immigrating to the United States? Yes. Has there always been people immigrating to the United States? Yes. Are most people in this country the descendants of immigrants? Yes. Like, give us your tired, weak, and poor, right? The Statue of Liberty, like, that's us. And yet, has there also been a rise of illegal immigration? It appears so, and largely the Trump administration ran their campaign on that. Does that stoke fear and potentially create a sense of division and animosity towards the other and someone that's different than us? Yeah, I think it can do that. It doesn't have to. And this is I'm not going to totally dive into an immigration, side spin here. But does the law matter? Yes. Should people immigrate lawfully? Yes. Is immigrating illegally illegal? Yes. Does a country have the right to defend its borders? Yes. Should a country defend its borders? Yes. Yes, that's not wrong. That's a healthy thing. If you don't, you're going to have chaos. You're going to have, all sorts of unwanted activity, drugs, all sorts of factors. So there you have it. But now, I think Christians especially have to be careful if you have no compassion for brothers and sisters in Christ in particular who are fearful that they're going to get bounced out of their country back to some other place, right. And they're like living in fear about that. Again, this is a tense, complicated conversation. Yeah. It can bleed one way or the other. All compassion, like, just let everybody be happy and be here. Well, that's stupid because that's toxic empathy. That's basically like, let's just let compassion rule without any discrimination of truth or whatever.
Right.
But on the other side, if it's just all truth and no compassion, and there's no like, man, yeah, put myself in someone's shoes, like sympathize with them. What would this feel like? And how do I love a brother and sister? What does this look like in the church? I mean, I've seen multiple, our network actually did it, offered trainings and like video calls on like how churches should handle interactions with ICE. Yeah, bro.
Wow.
Like, oh yeah. Yeah. Because again, Spokane has also a lot, of refugees, particularly from Ukraine, the
10%
Ukrainian
of our
war.
population.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And so I think as things happen politically, regardless of maybe people's political views, we have to remember in all of these things, anchor yourself to the truth of the kingdom of God, the truth of Christ. And yeah, these are complex issues. I'm not at all assuming I can solve immigration in this conversation, right? Mm-hmm. Like, is immigration good? To a certain amount, like, because the flip would be, Ryan, adopt every kid on the planet.
Yeah.
Well, my family can't adopt every child on the planet. Does that make sense? Like, there is a sense of responsibility that you have to tend your home. but we also want to be hospitable and welcoming. So we want to also open our lives to more people than just our own.
Yeah.
But to do that, you have to have resources. You have to have a certain level of order.
Yeah.
And so on a macro scale, that's what countries are dealing with. And so, but again, you just have a new administration that is, it appears, whatever, how hard it is to trust all the media, but that kind of on a mission, try to rectify a far too open border.
For sure.
And now like deporting all sorts of people. And I read an interesting article recently that like some of those people, you're just like, yeah, get them out of here. Like interestingly, a good chunk of those people, depending on the ethnicities in certain segments, are Christian brothers and sisters. So think about that.
Right.
Now, again, if they broke the law, I mean, I get you could make a clear argument just to say, well, you broke the law.
Right.
Like if you, a brother in Christ and a friend, if you walked out of here and robbed a 7-Eleven on your way to work and, like got pulled over and got put in jail for it, like I don't think I would come and advocate like, yeah, no consequences for you.
Right.
I'd be like, I'll try to like pay your bail. I'll try to get you out. You're still going to have to go
pay for the Slurpee.
You're still gonna have to stand before a judge. You know what I'm saying? So this is what I mean though. This is the real tension. And by the way, this is gonna just explode in the rest of the book of Acts. Because what happens now is the church of Jesus Christ goes cross-cultural.
Yeah.
It was Jewish. And so it could move at a certain speed and like an unfettered multiplication, like viral, because it was working on the same cultural, relatively theological, and ethnic substrat.
Yeah.
But now it moves out, and that leads to the next sermon, the third sermon, which essentially was on key people in key places. So it's like the gospel's for all. How do we get along if that happens? And then how does our Jerusalems and our Antiochs and our, our Sauls and our Barnabases and
key
our
friendships,
key friendships, key relationships, key locations. How do we do this?
Yep.
And it illustrates that the movement of Jesus Christ called the church overcomes significant cultural and ethnic and relational barriers in order to continue to move out in its effectiveness. And of course, the brilliance of that is like, how does it stay integral to itself?
Right.
When something has to adapt and change, it's easy to lose it. And this is why I have invited Dr. Jerry Sitzer to come speak in a handful of weeks. It's actually after Easter. But when we teach through Acts 15,
Love it.
which is the Jerusalem Council.
Yeah.
And it's like the major convening. Jerry's going to argue that it is the most important meeting in the history of the world.
Wow.
Christian or secular. The most important meeting in the history of the world is Acts 15. So wet your whistle there.
Love it. All right. You know what I want to talk about?
What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about spiritual friendship and strangers. So there's kind of two things that are happening here that we get relationally. So we get the spiritual friendships between Saul and Barnabas and Agabus. And we also have complete strangers, people who are cross-cultural from us.
Yeah.
And this last summer, we had an amazing sermon series that we went through on prayer. And you're like, why are you bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because it did something culturally, I think, in our church that was really exciting. It made people more comfortable with what some church liturgies called passing of the peace, but it's just turning around and talking to the person behind you.
Yep.
And it's funny, when we sit in an auditorium, we kind of come with this frame of thought, like, all right, I'm coming here for the worship, and then I'm going to consume the sermon, and it's going to be great, and I'm going to walk out. But, like, we're a family.
Yeah.
And so, like, turn around, give the person next to you a fist bump, high five, hug, pray with them. And I'll be honest, I'll just say to myself, like, that's like a little bit uncomfortable. You're like, pray with someone I don't know. But these are your spiritual brothers and sisters.
Yep.
And so there's that group of people. And then we also have maybe what to some is like strangers, which are our actual neighbors here in Spokane. Maybe you pull right into your garage as soon as you get home and you don't know your neighbor's name, and there's a total invitation there. So I want to dive deeper on these two categories of relationships that we find ourselves in pretty often, which is spiritual friendships and maybe the hope and longing for that, because you mentioned even in your sermon that we're in mainly what some call a loneliness epidemic, and then also like what are the relationships right in front of us that are opportunities that maybe God's actually like kind of nudging us towards that we don't necessarily know how to engage.
Okay.
So you get to pick which one we get to tackle first.
Let's tackle this friendship.
Perfect.
Yeah.
With spiritual friendship, it's interesting because I think a lot of us long for friendship. And when I was in college, I had a mentor who gave some pretty probably common dating advice, who it's like, be the kind of person you'd want to date, right? It's like, okay, that's actually pretty smart. Like that's pretty
Yeah.
basic. I think the same is true for friendship. Would you agree?
Totally.
Totally.
Yeah.
So in the church, like when we think about community groups, like, I mean, and this is a pressure and a weight that True Hope staff carries on a week by week basis. We say, hey, connect in a community group. And then we have basically these like friendship maker people who are like
Yep.
the secret agents of our
Yep.
church trying to connect people. But I think there's probably some critical things about friendship in the church that can either make or break. I think one of them, and we've talked about this before, is just how busy you are.
Yeah. Totally.
What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, the reality is you friendship requires proximity. It requires vulnerability at the ultimate level. It requires spontaneity. There was a book I went through with some guys. In fact, I have a group of guys. There's 8 of us.
Yeah.
We try to do a monthly hang.
Yeah.
And this is different than my community group. And there's a book that I read and invited all these guys to read, and it's a book for men, like obstacles men must overcome, lies men must,
That's the one by John Tyson.
John Tyson and Jeff Bethke. It's called, what is it called? It's slipping my mind. Bummer. Wish I could remember. I could look it up real quick.
Is it like something lies?
Yeah, well, it says like 7 lies. Jeff, here. Thank you,
Yeah, so
Internet.
you look for that. So what's cool about this, what I want you to talk about a little further, is your actual personal experience with
It's called Fighting Shadows.
Fighting Shadows.
Yeah,
Thank
Fighting
you.
Shadows, and the subtitle is interesting. So I know I don't want to steal their thunder, but I think this is getting debuted through the men's ministry at True Hope Church. But it's overcoming 7 lies that keep men from becoming fully alive. So I don't want to steal their thunder, but I think that's rolling out through our men's ministry.
Cool.
But the answer there is, I read it, encouraged these 8 guys that I'm with to read it. We read it. There's one of the components is like men are lonely. And so trying to get like a monthly hang together, we have dinner or breakfast, and we just have like one question. And it's always, it could be a goofy question, like what's the greatest movie ever and why? And it just kind of creates like deep conversation, or really serious, like, hey, what's the hardest thing you've been dealing with in the last 30 days?
Yeah.
So, but I say that to reference and give credit. I think it was in that book, if I'm remembering right, on the epidemic of loneliness, where they said friendship, which a lot of men struggle with. Women just are a little more gifted here than men. But it requires 3 things: proximity, spontaneity, and vulnerability. And I think those are profound.
Yeah.
In other words, you can't build a friendship with someone you're not with.
Right.
You have to be around them.
Proximity.
So back to your point, proximity. If you're so busy, I think it was Bobby who made this comment in a sermon. Like, some of you are too busy to follow Jesus the way Jesus tells us we have to be followed.
Yeah.
Like, it's like you want it, but you have to adapt your life for it. And so I do think it's hard. Like, I know there's all sorts of tension people have about, gathering in church regularly, but I'm like, look, some people that come to church so infrequently, they gather with God's people once every quarter. It's like, that's a hard proximity muscle to build.
Right.
Right? Like, you got to have your people.
Yeah.
So proximity is about rhythm and closeness, connection. Spontaneity is very interesting. In other words, if the friendship is ruled by harsh rigidity,
Yeah.
it will cap out. You're closer friends with them when you get their phone number and you can text them, versus like, we have an agreed upon time, we meet once a month. Does that make sense?
Or email about it.
Yeah, exactly. You really know your friendship's a different level when it's like, hey, we don't have much going this Friday night. Like, what do you have? Then you know you're at like a next level. So they would call it 3 levels of friendship. Level 1's proximity. And we just got to learn that there's a lot of enemies to that. Number 2 is spontaneity. And I know some people are more spontaneous than others. I happen to be extremely relationally spontaneous.
Yeah, what'd you do last night?
Last night, I went and played pickleball till 10 p.m. And I even knew I was getting up at 4 or 5 this morning to get ready to record this podcast. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And I didn't want to go. But I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. So you're right. I think spontaneity comes naturally for some more than others, but it is the marker.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. Your closest friendship in life, if you're married, usually is your spouse. It should be.
Yeah,
And isn't that the person you're the most spontaneous with?
for sure.
Yeah. The 3rd level is vulnerability. Then you know, okay, if I have someone I'm around consistently, someone that I flex my schedule for and they flex their schedule for, and someone that I'll actually share, and there's a difference between transparency and vulnerability, which I know maybe you should talk about that. What do you think the difference is between transparency and vulnerability?
Yeah, the working definition that I've stolen from somebody who said this to me was vulnerability is someone willing to kind of poke and prod, like actually like in your heart, like touch on the things that could potentially hurt you. Transparency is just saying what is.
Yeah.
And there's no growth in it.
It's self-governed. It's like self-administering revelation. Like, I tell you something about me. I'm being transparent. Vulnerables, I let you point something out about me.
Yeah, that's good.
And I keep opening the cupboards.
Yeah.
Instead of shutting them.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So transparency, like preachers can be transparent.
Like plan transparency.
Correct. But they cannot be vulnerable with their congregation unless the congregation gets to talk back. Think about it. In a sermon, I can be transparent.
Right.
But I can't really be vulnerable.
Right.
In a sermon. I can be vulnerable with my elders. I can be vulnerable in my community group. I can be vulnerable in my guys' hang. I can be vulnerable with the counselor. I can be vulnerable with my wife. I can be vulnerable with you as a close friend.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Right.
I'm arguing, I don't think I can be really vulnerable from the pulpit.
Yeah.
Not because I'm afraid to or don't want to.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the mode actually works. Because I'm curating it. Does that make sense?
For sure.
I get to decide how much I disclose.
Yeah. So on that point, I think it's really critical to ask the question, like, are the relationships in my life ones that either allow or do I put myself in a position that someone can talk back?
100%.
If it's just relationships via text,
100%. You're right. You're not getting that 3rd level of relationship, which is vulnerability. I was at an event recently, and a guy who's a significant leader, like mega business coach, leadership coach, like big time. He asked me a very probing question. He said, if you get off track and start doing stupid stuff, are there 3 guys that'll call you out on your... That's what he said to me. He's like, if you went sideways, does your wife have the phone number of some guys to call that she's confident they could pull you aside?
yeah.
I was like, I think so, but that's a good question,
That's a
dude.
great question.
That's a good question for a pastor, but it's a good question for anybody.
Right.
Like, I think it's one of those things of like, okay, so layers of friendship. Friendship starts with proximity. So when I would just get real practical here, some people are listening to this and they're like, yep, that's what's wrong with my life. I don't have friends. And what I would say is be friendly. Is your life structured in a way where you have margin to put other people around yourself?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I had an idea, but I'm just gonna hold it in. So, I just think that I think people need the practical and some tips on like how to like win friends, make friends, and be the kind of person people want to be around. Be interested in them.
Yeah.
Be interested in them. Like, what's going on in your life? How are you doing? Where are you winning? How are you thriving? What are you excited about? Like, be interested in what they're interested in. And if you can do that, you'll open up conversation at least, because everybody likes to talk about what they love. So if you really feel friendless, you really feel lonely, you really feel alone, I think you have to ask yourself, do I have the emotional relational margin? Like, is my life structured in a way
Yeah.
that I can carve out some time to figure out some proximate relationships?
Yeah.
Well, when I approach those proximate relational goals, what do I do? Do your homework
Yeah.
and talk to them about what they're interested in.
For sure.
Now, if it's a decent person, they're not a total flaming narcissist, they'll send the volleyball back over the net.
Yeah.
And they'll go, well, thanks. Like, we spent the last 5 minutes talking about what I'm interested in. Like, how about you? Like,
Yeah.
what do you do? What do you like? And then you start to build some reciprocity. And hopefully in that's why community groups matter. That's why Guys Hang matters, men's ministry matters, men's breakfast, women's ministry matters in the church, because what we're trying to facilitate is proximity.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what we're trying to do.
For sure.
We're trying to, because you can't, at the next level, it's like spontaneity by nature begins when people take it past the men's breakfast, past the women's Thrive Night, past the event. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And the church can't really facilitate that.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm just talking as a pastor now. I'm like, we can facilitate proximate.
Yeah. You're giving people opportunities.
Yes, but people have to be trained and encouraged on how to make friendships.
Yeah. Like, total shameless plug here. So serving teams at True Hope Church, like, while we advertise it and talk about it, like join a serving team, we're not just doing that because we're like, we need more people. Like,
Yep.
there is a reality. Like,
Yeah,
we need people
totally.
to pull off a Sunday. But it is, I think, what a lot of people call the liminal space of the vacancy, the margin, if you will, before a service. It's, man, I don't know if you've ever been, well, you're here every single Sunday at this time, but if you've never been to True Hope Church at like 8 a.m. on a Sunday,
Yeah, different.
people like, people are talking about their weeks, and it is one of the spaces you can make friends.
Yep.
And it's awesome.
Yep.
Another way to do this is through activities.
Yep.
And I think about, like, we got to know each other riding bikes.
Yep.
It's like you do something that involves a physical element, whether it's going on a walk or going on a run or working out with somebody.
Yep.
It opens the mind and body up to have a different kind of conversation because you're both working towards something at the
Yep.
same time. And that's what
Yep.
serving teams is
but
too.
what is happening in all those things? Serving teams, like entry level church community connection event, all of it's about proximity.
Right, totally.
All about proximity.
Yep.
And it's giving enough time to build something. It's only then, right, where it's like community groups is probably the one entity that does move it a layer deeper. Because when you're starting to meet in someone's home on a regular rhythm, proximity is happening for sure, but you've got strong feeder to actually do more in that space.
Yeah.
To actually be vulnerable if you know someone well enough and you trust them and they poke. And it's like, okay, that's actually happening. So I would say that's why the greatest relational probably medium the church has is community groups and why we value it so much. But I also think people have to kind of lead themselves there. It's so hard because right now, just transparently, there's maybe 100 people who are on a waiting list to get in a community group.
Yeah.
It's
wow.
something like that. It's high.
We need leaders.
Yes. And so it's that what we need is people to step up and say, I'll facilitate a space for proximity to happen.
Yeah, that's good.
And see where God wants to take it. So again, 3 layers of friendship: proximity, spontaneity, vulnerability. I think that's really, really interesting. And I think we're in a time where genuine friendship is so needed, especially with how much our phones are, vying for replacement
Right.
of connection. And I'm not anti-technology. I do think it can enhance. Like, I've been able to stay connected to a friend that I met in November, and I'm going to see him this week.
Yeah,
He's
that's
a
great.
pastor in Nashville, and like, it's all been via technology. So I'm not anti-technology.
Yep.
It does serve a place, but it's not the same. It's not the same as like, now we're going to go be together. Like, it's
Right.
not the same.
Right.
And so we've got to learn to not replace people with our phones. We got to learn to have our tool phones serve to enhance our embedded real relationships.
Yeah.
And to do that, we're going to have to carve out time to be proximate. We're going to have to carve out time to be spontaneous.
Yep.
That was an example. Like last night, it's kind of cheeky, but it's like I preached 3 services. I got home pretty late. We took my wife and daughter to lunch after because I use my kids as a sermon illustration. So I owe when I do that. And then I got home like 2:30. So my day was getting here at the church at like, I don't know, 6 something a.m. I get home at 2:30 and I'm just tired. And, this handful of guys are like, man, we want to go play pickleball. I'm just like, I I don't know if I want to do that. I didn't want to do it until the moment I left, but I went, chose that spontaneous response, and yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
And by the way, I was undefeated.
Yeah.
I mean, just here and there.
Yeah.
In
We're talking about
fact,
pride next, actually.
Yeah, one of the things that came up actually while we're playing, they're like, so you're recording a podcast early tomorrow morning. I'm like, I am. They're like, so if we beat you every time, can we brag about it on the podcast? So I'm just throwing it out there. 8 wins to 0 wins. That's how it went. But whatever, for what it's worth.
I think what you said there that's important is relationship is a spiritual discipline.
That's good.
And it's a spiritual discipline even more now because we're fed a half truth. That relationship can be done via technology and it's easy.
Yep. I also think there's people that think deep and healthy and enjoyable relationships are accidents. They're not.
No.
They are very intentional. And I don't want to make this sound like, I know there are people who are deeply introverted, and I know that there are people that the effort it takes for them to do this is much more than others who feel like, by nature, they're just more relational and engaging. But I want to say this is a strong statement that's going to make some people mad. Maybe not, but it might. Why is it that the same people over and over again are the ones with the friends? Here's the junior high answer. Because they're popular and people like them and they're good looking and they have charisma. Maybe. Or maybe those who are friendly make friends.
Yeah.
Like, I'm poking. Someone's listening in a car right now and they're choosing if they're going to be vulnerable or not with this distance jab. But it's like, I just find that there's certain people that, like, even if they're very introverted, they value this and they're going to be in a place of relational health. They're going to find their people.
Yeah.
And I just want to, like, encourage and empower people. Like, find your people.
Yeah.
Like, it takes some discipline. It is a spiritual discipline. Take some spontaneity. Say yes to hard things. Being in relationship is what you were made for. Spiritual friendship is a great gift. And, I think the thing I would say that I want to add, and then I'll shut up and you can take it on from here. We also have to add the spiritual part. Sometimes it's easy for us just to have friendship because we gather around a practice or, like, a sport, an activity, whatever. But if we're honest, we haven't really brought the spiritual into it in a while.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to remember it's not just friendship. It needs to be spiritual friendship because we're spiritual beings.
Yeah. To that point, because I think that's a really important point, I think most people desire deeper conversations. Sometimes they just don't know the right lever to pull in order to begin that conversation. And I think that's the power of the hang, going back to your previous example, because it's one structured question that everyone has to answer. And so sometimes I think being the most encouraging friend is being the person who has an intentional question to ask.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
Speaking of that, let's talk about our friend Barnabas.
Yeah.
Son of encouragement, I believe is what his name means.
Yeah.
I deeply resonate with this man. I feel like him and I would be buddies if he was still here.
I affirm that. You are a Barnabas for sure.
And I think about this is something I learned. I don't know why I never thought about this when we were at the Holy Spirit conference in Portland. But they talked about how encouraging someone is just to instill courage in someone.
Put strength in them.
And I'm like, oh, totally.
Yep.
So it's pretty easy, actually. Like, just think about when you're with somebody, what is this person actually good at? And they might already know that, but just say it out loud.
Yeah.
And when you say it out loud, it's wild what affirming someone will do in opening up conversations because affirming someone also creates vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because it makes them ask the question, do I believe that about myself?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, I think that this latest teaching was a surprise. Again, kind of a surprising text and how well I think it practically equips people. I had a lot of, just comments and conversations with folks. I think that felt inspiring, right? And I was using some illustrations too of the heart with just a lot on my mind with my dad who's going into surgery in a week. And also just like the roller coaster story of our family. And I just have this thing in my spirit for our church, and I hope it's coming through and coming out. Like, we're embarking on all sorts of things by faith. We're trying to figure out what's next. And I think, like, man, knowing that it's our turn. Like, it's your turn, friend. It's your turn to, like, take that step towards a new friendship. It's your turn to reach out to the stranger. It's your turn to encourage someone. It's your turn to, like Saul, step into that season and that moment of leading and risking. It's your turn. It's your turn. And like we can have one of two stories, like the safe bystander who's like, I managed all of my downside risk and had nothing happen to me that I didn't want. Or you can be the person that steps into risk, but it's risk controlled by God. It's his roller coaster. Like what?
Right.
Like where do we fail there? But yeah, have a story to tell. Your hair's blown back, got a few tears coming down your cheeks, and like it's part of life.
Yeah.
And I think there's something in that I just felt from a lot of people, like, man, that's calling to people. Like, yeah, following Jesus is an adventure.
Yeah.
It's an adventure. And so I do love the places also of Jerusalem and Antioch. I think those are worthy discussions. I think these are great conversations to have with friends on the topic of friendship and spiritual friendship. It's like, tell me about your Jerusalem. And what I mean by that is like, here's what I mean. Tell me about the foundations of your spiritual journey. What are they? Who are they? Where did it start? Like, tell me your story. Like, story is the thing that connects us to people.
Right.
My wife was reading a book. We went to a large church connect event in January with our network over in Seattle, and Dick Voth was the speaker.
Okay.
He's some 80-something-year-old pastor, just absolute awesome guy. He mentors Mark Batterson.
Oh.
So he's a stud. Yeah. Like he's worked in like governments and met people all over the world. And he's a super strong Christian guy. And he has a book, and I won't remember what it's called, but it's about like 4 movements of friendship. It's like it uses a baseball diamond as an analogy: first base, second base, third base. In fact, I could probably find it because I took a bunch of notes when I listened to him. But I love that he just talked about like our stories connect us to people. And I think, again, hearing your Jerusalem, like, what's your Jerusalem?
Yeah.
Like, what is the thing in your life or the season of your life that was your roots? Where'd you come from? Mm-hmm. And I think everyone came from somewhere.
Right.
Like it's an immediate conversation starter. Mm-hmm. So, but I also think, what's your Antioch?
Yeah.
What's your opportunity zone? What's the thing that you kind of think God might use this person, this relationship, this circumstance, but it's not certain yet.
Yeah.
The story's still being written.
Yeah.
And it's like there's a lot of opportunity there for God's glory and your good and the advancement of his kingdom. So I look at like your foundation story and kind of your opportunity story. Like those are two just beautiful places. And infusing those places are people, right? So like we are people who have come from somewhere and we're going somewhere, and we're gifted by God, and we need Barnabas's and Saul's and Agabus's in the whole journey. In other words, we need people who we can encourage and who will encourage us. We need people who will step into the risk of teaching when they used to be threatened to be killed, Saul. We need people to stir us to action and kind of confront the things that are distorting us a little bit. And in so doing, we move forward on the mission of God, and it's a great adventure.
Oh man, I want to jump in on this.
Jump in, bro.
So let's connect the spiritual friendship to the strangers via places. I think this is all going to come together with your last sermon. So when you think about your story, if you can't think of something that you're grateful for, whether it's a mentor, a moment, maybe a difficult season that you feel like you saw God's hand in, like there's something, I won't say broken, but there's a disconnect happening in your mind and your heart that's not allowing you to look at the past and find the goodness. Because I promise God's goodness is in there, that thread's there. Now, if you practice that in relationship, that's going to take you deeper with your closest friends that are part of your spiritual community. But here's the best thing. When you're trying to connect with strangers, those same stories are going to be the things that bring them in, because they're going to be attracted to that hope. They're going to be attracted to the goodness of God. They're going to be attracted to, how is this person so resilient after all this pain and suffering they've gone through? They're going to notice that you're thankful and that you're content, things that they themselves want to exhibit and have.
Yeah.
You are practicing that in your Jerusalem with your spiritual friendships, so that then you have substance to take to Antioch when you actually have opportunities.
Yeah, it's great. So good.
And I think about that with our neighbors on our street. And just this last year, we lost our golden retriever, and precious Griffey, and that was hard. And I won't like try to pull more out of the story than there is there, but I will say our neighbors are avid Mariners fans. If you know my wife, she's a big Mariners fan, just like yourself. I'm kind of a vicarious
San Diego Padres fan, right?
South Dakota fan.
South Dakota fan, yeah, because you wear that hat. You don't even know what team you're wearing.
Exactly. But you know what shocked me the most was our one engagement with these neighbors has oftentimes been around a Mariners game.
Yeah.
And they're not believers. And they're like, hey, how are you doing? We just gotten back from a trip. I said, we're doing okay. We lost Griffey. He passed away. And they were so empathetic and sorry. And I said, hey, it's all good. And I do know, because we have an upcoming dinner date with them here soon, that had an impact on how we were even processing that grief. Because here's the thing, we mourn differently than those who mourn. And the faith and hope that we have as Christians, it is inspiring, encouraging, and the world wants it.
Yeah. So let me just give you some thoughts on this from Dick Voth. These are so good, bro. But man,
I'll buckle up.
Buckle up. And I hope this just blesses so many people listening to this. Okay. 2 things you're going to have to deal with your entire life: relationships and money. One of these things will make you rich.
Oh, dude.
It ain't money. It's relationships.
That's good.
And that's what this whole last 3 weeks of teachings has been about. It's about relationships. How do we get along? Who's in? How wide does God's grace stretch to as far as ethnicities and people groups? Like everybody. God wants everybody in. How do we get along with them then? We're always going to be in a relational struggle. And we're also always going to be in the arena of relationships. And one of these things will make you rich. And it's not money, it's relationships. So how do we do it? Relationships are, he talks about 4 movements. The first movement is history giving. The way you build relationships is you give your history.
Wow.
You share your story.
Share your Jerusalem.
Yeah. Share your Jerusalem. You say, hey, this is where I've been. This is what's been going on in my life, in my world. And he talks about 42% of the Bible is narrative.
42%.
42%. It's story. It's history giving.
Yeah.
It's God's giving us the history of a people.
Yeah.
God's giving us the history of himself. God is disclosing his story to us. He's saying, this is who I am. This is where I started. This is, we don't know where he's always been self-existent, but like, this is where I spoke and framed worlds, like, right? Like, so God's sharing his history. He's relational with us, and we need to share our story, our history with other people. When you share your history, you are making relationship. He has another quote. This is crazy. He's like, people are walking books. You turn the pages by asking questions. Whew. Isn't that good? Mm-hmm. I'm like, way to go, Richard all over it. So yeah, like you turn the pages by asking another question. That's kind of what I mean when I said, when you meet someone and you want to make friendship, if you're not asking questions, hey, what are you into? What do you like? Where'd you come from? What's your story? Like, when did that happen? How'd that start? How many kids you got? Like, I see you got, like, if you don't ask questions, friend, like, you're being a poor friend.
Yeah.
Like, good friends ask questions. And what that signals to someone else is because people are like books. You're turning the pages by asking the next set of questions.
Stay curious.
Dude, he also says, this is crazy. People are also like calendars and journals. The calendars are the events of their story. Their journals are the interpretations of those events.
Whew. Books,
and so
calendars, journals.
Yep. And we ask people, we work through the pages of the book by asking them questions. And we serve people by helping them process the events,
right,
and asking them if their journal entries match the heart of God.
Whew.
This is spiritual friendship.
Yes.
So, I mean, we can talk a little about our relationship. I mean, you approached me 6 years ago?
A little bit longer.
6 or 7 years ago, and said, hey, you were new to our church. You were at that time, like what? How old were you?
I was 14, I think.
No, dude. You were
15?
No, you were in your early 20s.
Yeah, I was like 22.
And you were like, here I am, like, I met you, but we're new to the church here. And long story short, I had... you started sharing your history with me about your dad and your upbringing and your early childhood life. And you're like, you're just looking for a mentor, wondering if you'd mentor me. Yeah. And I was kind of like, I don't know you. Like, this is a little awkward. Like, I mean, maybe like I want to, but it kind of felt like, you're being very forward and bold, which was great. But kind of like, I don't know that I can guarantee that that's going to occur, but I do know where we could start.
Yeah.
Let's connect. And so you have to start turning the pages.
Right.
You got to turn my pages. I got to turn your pages. You got to ask questions. And then I think you discover that. And then what happens is as you build trust with someone over proximity, spontaneity, you can get vulnerable and you can say, hey, tell me about this memory, this moment, this part of your life.
Yeah.
This thing that when you were in high school, how did that go? It's like, well, here's the event. And then it's like, how did you internalize that? Like, what do you think about that? And we've had all sorts of that happen in our relationship, like things about, some of your addiction to achievement and productivity and all this stuff. And it's like, it's good stuff, but it's like, is there some sort of overreaction there?
Right.
Are you basically maybe interpreting with your journal of your history certain events that maybe need to be reinterpreted in light of the truer story, the fuller story? So anyway, his first base is history giving. The second base is affirmation. It's just affirming people.
Yeah.
It's Barnabas.
Right.
It's encouraging them, giving them words of encouragement, giving people actions of service. In this way, you're deepening your sense of connection and your sense of appreciation for someone. Third base, covenant. This is where it takes time, where you commit to someone. You're like, we're in this together. I'm going to commit to you. You're going to commit to me. This is where you start to mutually be able to create reciprocal expectation.
Wow.
A lot of the people mess up in their friendships because here's what they do. They get to first base with someone and they skip second base and they just try to get to third. In other words, we've connected just a little bit. Now my expectations are through the roof for you. And the moment you don't meet them, I'm offended.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is where I talked about my youth pastor in 2 sermons ago said to me, hey guys, believe the best, expect less in friendships. When you start, what we tend to do is believe the worst and expect everything from the get-go. It's not that our relationship should stay in low expectation mode because someone could rightly rebuke me and say, that's shallow. There should be a friendship we get where it's like, no, I expect if my wife dies, like you will be there for me. And you should. But the problem is a lot of people want third base relationships without first base and second base practices.
And that's
They want covenant, they want commitment, they want all of that, but they don't want to put in the time to share their histories, to commit to proximity, to give affirmation. To like do all that, to interpret the journals, listen to the calendar of events, turn the pages through questions. They don't want to do that and then affirm. They just want third base. So third base is awesome. It's where we can truth tell people. It's where third base is what that guy was asking me, that leadership coach. He's like, do you got guys in your life that could look at you and say, hey dude, you're off. I can feel it. I sense it. You're off. That only gets there because you've worked base 1 and base 2. And then you have that opportunity. And then home base, and I'll be done. He calls it dreaming. Home base is where you develop a friendship with someone where you dream together. And he says, when you dream together, you're at the final base of friendship. And here's why. A friend doesn't just challenge you, doesn't just hey, you're off, doesn't just affirm you, doesn't just share history. When you get to this level, a friend will sit you down and hold you accountable for your dreams, not just your actions. They'll say, I know this is in your heart. I know you've said you feel God calls you to this. Why are you falling short of it? At some level, you could argue Barnabas was level 4 with Saul. Because he helped protect Saul when people were trying to kill him. He introduced Saul to the apostles in Jerusalem. This is all in Acts chapter, 9 and 10. He also, though, goes and gets Saul when he's in Tarsus. And he knows God has a purpose for Saul. And so that is a friend holding another friend accountable to the dreams God has for him. So his whole thing is like, when you look at all of this, movements of history giving, affirmation, committed covenantal conversations, truth-telling, tenacity, all that at the third level. And then finally, dreaming together. The last thing I'll say is this. We've got to learn how to move deeper in the levels of our relationships between what do I know, what do I think, and what do I feel. When you get, this is his deal, when you get deeper with people, the conversation moves past what you know and what you think to what you feel.
Right.
Right. So I'll give an example. So like I had a situation I can think of through COVID where it was really difficult, and I was very conversant with people about what I knew. And I was even conversant about what I thought, but I only was conversant with my wife about what I felt. And that was during all that time of people angry and mad and emailing me and telling me I wasn't doing it right and that I was in league with the devil and I was compromising and the church shouldn't do this and you should stand up to the government and you have no courage and no. And I just said to her, I feel abandoned. So this is where it's interesting. I just had a conversation with a good friend. He's leads a recovery ministry. And he said to me, when you're having conversations with your kids, he was coaching me on talking to my kids. He was like, don't ever accept the answer when you ask them how they're doing and they say fine. Fine is not an emotion. We need to get to, how are you doing? I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'm sad. I'm disappointed. I'm anxious. I'm angry. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to give people tools here is like when you're at third base and home base in relationships, friendships, you can get here. You can't get there though without a strong foundation of history giving and affirmation.
Yeah.
Which sets the tone to be able to go, hey, Sean, I know a lot about what you think about the given side, but how are you feeling? Like, how do you feel? I'll share this. This is like planned transparency. Well, it's actually spontaneous transparency. You and I had this conversation a while ago, and I've shared this with you. I've shared this with our elder board. I've shared this with a leadership coach I'm working with right now. I just said, if I was to think about my life, like I feel like A or higher in my professional life. I feel like in the B range in my marriage, but I feel like I'm a C minus as a dad. Like in my parenting, I feel the most vulnerable and the most weak. And I don't know if it's because I'm approaching a season where I'm about to send a son out of the house. My daughter's talking about moving out, not living with me. I'm just like, what is happening? So I don't know if it's just me dealing with that, but also just being, transparent about like, I feel this way. It's not even so much like a coach I'm working with tried to peel that back and go, okay, why? Like, and he's evaluating my schedule and my interaction with my kids and all these things. Like, well, gosh, it's not as bad as you think. Okay, but I still feel that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so getting down to that level in our relationships, I feel this way. And the thing we have to be careful of and people got to learn is people crave this so deeply. But if you try to pull this out of the oven before it's cooked, it's just, it doesn't work for you or the person you're trying to do with.
Right.
You have to move through history giving, sharing, affirming, and then you can get to these deeper levels.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons why all this is just so tremendously important for us, the church, in this moment is, if you didn't listen to the sermon yesterday, go back and listen to it. Otherwise, this example won't make sense. But you gave the example of getting on the roller coaster.
Yep.
Here's the deal. Riding a roller coaster by yourself is terrible.
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Because how much more fun is it to listen to the guy in front of you scream like a little girl and you get off and you have that story, you're like, I didn't even know Sean's voice could go that high.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. You have someone to see that you're scared before you get on.
Right.
And that's the thing is, if like Christianity is not a solo sport.
Nope.
Don't pretend it is.
Nope.
Because the invitation is so much more full of joy when we get to do it with people that we love and who care about us.
Yes. Yeah. Amen. I mean, I pray that this is, these last series of messages in its practical approach and in its relational focus helps do a few things. I hope for some people, it just helps wake a few people up that they're living more isolated and alone than they need to, and that is healthy for them. So I want to wake, like I stir that longing and awareness for people that like there's more here. I think for others, I want to equip and go, hey, you've been frustrated in your pursuit of relationships because you're doing it unwisely. You're putting third base expectations on first base relationships.
Yeah.
That doesn't help you. You are too addicted to the rumor mill and the gossip train, and you harm people's confidence of being in friendship with you.
Yeah.
You are too self-focused, and you don't Barnabas this thing and like encourage other people and put strength in them and affirm them. I just think so. What I want to do is stir and awaken people who feel like, I know I'm lonely and I just am mad, or I'm on the edge of maybe being really unhealthy here and I need to wake up. But I also want to equip people with tools to help them figure out, okay, how do I get along with people, especially in God's family, that are different from me, that maybe I wouldn't think I'd connect to? Like, how do I build those kind of friendships, relationships? How do I take the relationships I have and make them go deeper? A lot of them are very casual and very convenience driven. Well, we go to the same church. We work at the same place. It's all convenience driven.
Yeah.
And we've got to figure out how to move through the diamond,
Right.
and get where we need to go. And I suppose the last thing, like you're saying there, is just to encourage people who are on the journey. Like, this is worth the investment.
Yeah.
This is worth the work. It's worth the risk. Because like the roller coaster, it is a risk. It is absolutely a risk to make friends.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a risk to meet people. It's a risk to say, God, I'm open and available. Use me to reach my neighbors. Use me to reach my community. Use me to serve in my church, whether it's in community group leadership or it's the proximate connections of serving teams that helps me get further, or it's men's breakfast, or it's women's events, or whatever it is. Like, God, use me because I want to help others get here.
Yeah.
I actually think those three things: wake up, get equipped, and be encouraged. That like, this is never going away. It's part of what it means to be in the family of God, and it will make your life rich.
Yep.
Well, and maybe with this quote again, right? I love that quote.
Yeah.
There's two things in life you'll deal with until the day you die: relationships and money. And only one of those things will make you rich. And it ain't money. It's friendships.
Amen. Amen. The invitation is there. Go
That's
out on
good.
the roller coaster.